Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I am Matt Capper and this is another video on Raid Shadow Legends. So, you can see what's happened behind me. That happened this morning. I opened up, I only had 10 ancient shards. I opened them up. I'm part of the missions for event points. So I need event points to get my Ramantu. I'm on that, I'm like on the home stretch. So I opened up the 10, thought, hey, here's an event. I was even gonna open up my 4 Sacreds. And then that fully talked me out of it. I did get a legendary, I guess, a third Scion. Right, a third, not a fourth, but a third. Not a second, but a third Scion. So, you know, the useless of the bunch. Great. I swear they're doing it to get me to feed more unbind champions, whatever. But the big thing we saw, and I hope you saw it if you didn't, let me put it up there again for you. We pulled Scion. We pulled Scion out of a 10 pull. You know, the new login champion that I haven't even gotten to. I'm still a week away from getting my Cleopatrix. So I thought, why not? Here's a perfect opportunity for me to drop a video on Scion. So without further ado, I built him. So trust me, you don't have to. Here he is. Scion. Crawling Chaos. Removes all debuffs from this champion, then attacks all enemies. Places a 50% increase attack buff and a 30% increase crit damage buff on this champion for 1 turn after attacking. Evil Seed. Attacks 1 enemy. Places a block buffs debuff and a 100% heal reduction debuff for 2 turns. Will ignore any shield buffs. Nightmare Kopesh. Attacks 1 enemy, has a 20% chance of placing a block active skills debuff for 1 turn. Incarnate, passive. Enemies under block active skills, block buffs, and heal reduction debuffs cannot decrease this champion's turn meter. Oh, okay. First of all, we need to address the fact that I am recording this the next day, and yes, this is the Lemmy. We have the Lemmy in full force here. Thank you once again to those of you who gave on over Twitch over the last month for the Movember challenge. We put a goal for subs. We hit it. Part of that goal was if we hit it, I would shave to the whim of my audience, and this is what they chose. Closely contested. The handlebar mustache lost out by 1. So here it is, the Lemmy for this weekend only, and now immortalized for all of you to see. And actually, I think I crush it. Oi then! Oh, I'm really mad. You know, like I feel. Anyway, this is Scion. Here's his build for the video. We have stats here. Let's go through them. 34,000 HP, 4475 attack speed at 210. Obviously 100% crit rate, crit damage at 264, 254 accuracy. Big thing is we now have the ability with a maxed out Great Hall and some pretty good gear that we can go with an attack banner just to give you that extra attack for him, and of course getting the accuracy there so that we can go with a crit damage perception set. This gives us some extra speed, gives us the accuracy we need for PvE content so that I don't have to throw it in an accuracy banner, for example. Gives me that extra attack. And as far as his masteries go, we flip over here. This is kind of the latest iteration of what I go with. The big thing is I want improved parry, I want resurgent, and I want retribution, and how I get there is just through this. Obviously, if you had one of these, I would go to that instead. And then this is just getting down to Helm Smasher. The big thing here is I do want that Ruthless Ambush, and I do want Bring It Down. So here is his build. As far as using him, I know I cut off the video for the Ice Golem run which is kind of the place I thought he might be useful for PvE. Honestly, it isn't. His PvE abilities are pretty weak, and this aura is in dungeon, which is ironic because his dungeon ability is probably his weakest ability. He doesn't have anything. Most of what he does doesn't really synergize, in my opinion at least, with PvE content. It's actually kind of confusing to me that that's where Plarium decided to go with a dungeon, crit rate in dungeons. I feel like this might have been a rushed kit, honestly. This here, when we figure out where to use him, we use a block active skills, block buff with turn meter. So we need a champion that does, or a boss that does turn meter manipulation, which no dungeon really needs or has a major mechanic of. Doom Tower, perhaps very certain rooms. There are certain rooms he might become useful, though I still argue that you'd probably have other champions that you would just use rather than building this one out specifically for Alessandra, for example. And then, of course, you have this. Obviously, this is an AoE. It's a standard hitting AoE. You saw it in the previous video. But this is to tell you that they don't mind this A2 hitting hard, because this will be one turn, and the both of them are at 3-turn cooldown when booked. So obviously, it's use Crawling Chaos, hit everyone with an average multiplier, and then back it up with a very hard-hitting A2 that gets those extra buffs. The disadvantage of that is the buffs put on him after the fact is just that they can be removed in between turns. Is probably the biggest issue I have with that. And then, of course, he puts the block buffs, heal reduction. So these there are some notions for this. Again, very specific niche areas that block buffs and or heal reduction can be useful. There are some synergies. That's why I originally put him in with Venno, because the two of them seem to have some synergies in their units, but it didn't really make much of a difference, functionally speaking. And then, of course, this one has the block active skills, which kind of is just a continuation of the Evil Seed. So what we're going to do, instead of putting him through a dungeon, which is what I normally do, is because I honestly don't believe this is the champion you'll need or want or use in dungeons, or anywhere. But we're gonna take him. We're gonna go old school, and I'm gonna take him through some damage testing like we used to do, where we put him up against some like champions, other nuking champions with some sort of lockout skills or those sort of deals. So let's go to that next. We're gonna take him in there. We're gonna do some damage cycling, show you what his damage is compared to other champions, epics that you might have, and then we'll probably just run right to final thoughts. So here we go to the damage testing. All right, here we are. We're going to damage test at level stage 23 of the dragon. The reason for that is we have a void affinity. So I have a myriad of a couple different affinities, and I wanted to bring them in, and this was the easiest way to do it. Void affinity. It'll give you a good comparison. So we saw what Scion's stats look like for Phoenix. We're looking at very similar. He's got a higher attack and crit damage, so he's going to be hitting a little bit higher here. The next one we've got is Alika. Alika, very similar numbers, 46, 71, 276. Just a smidge higher, accuracy a little lower, but again, pretty comparable numbers there. And then we have Magnar. It's hard to really compare Magnar because he's HP based, but I would say his HP multiplier is significantly higher, and then the crit damage is lower than our test subject here. And then we're using Duck to debuff. So I just thought we'd bring in Duck here. I think because he was brought into the game later than all the rest, he's not getting as much play to people who don't have him as you realize. But man, oh man, this guy is a defense-based debuffer. So if you don't have Stagnite, or even if you do, you've got a Magic Affinity guy that can do a lot of the same things and be way more survivable. So, or at least moderately more survivable. Anyway, for this, let's jump in and let's see what each of the battles do, each of the damages do. We'll show you. Okay, so there we've got the debuff. Now we've got his Aether. Now keep in mind that the increased attack crit damage come after, right? So here it is, 47, 35 to 47, very likely. The, Helm Smasher versus not Helm Smasher. And then we've got her AoE, which hits 38, 43. So you're looking at almost identical numbers between the two on their AoEs. Hers has the ability of locking out skills. So she can actually lock out champions that have already taken turns. That's one of the things, is that it doesn't reset cooldowns. It just locks them out for a turn if they're already on cooldown. So keep that in mind if you're using her. The third person we have is Magnar, and you can see the kind of damage he's going to do. Look, he's hitting bigger numbers twice. So a significant realm of damage. He does have some very specific, it will only hit once if it's on an HP burn, has a chance to stun. So keep that in mind, but definitely a much bigger damage. And then the AoE here, again, you have block buffs or block active skills. It's to land one or the other. And 36, 43. You see, again, very similar numbers. He hit a little bit higher on averages than the other two, but of course he's got higher attack and crit damage, so he probably should. But again, you see the three of them. There's not a lot of big difference. So then you have to look at, well, what did it do? What did it do for you? And we'll go through the second one. We'll now use his A2. We need to back out and come back in because I need to use his A3 in order to set it, right? So again, we're going to use the A3 for him just to set up that extra damage. So now her A2 is attacks one enemy, ignores defense if the target has higher max HP, which, as you can see in dungeons, 9 out of 10 times, 99 out of 100 or more, that's going to be the case. You see there, 114,000 damage. That's no extra. There's no attack up on her by other people. We'll show his single target damage, 95,000. We'll show his single target damage, 88,000. So less than the other two, notably less than the other two, but it does put the decreased speed. So he's got a debuff with it, but he trades off, I would say, a significant amount of damage, considering he does have higher attack, higher crit damage than the other two, and still hitting that level. I guess we can do this just for giggles. Hey, look at that. He countered. Okay, now here's the deal. So this is part of his kit. This is only as good as the buff. So using the one prior to it, we'll take the hit. And there, 95. It didn't get a Helm Smasher proc. The difference between the two, you see the two of them are hitting virtually identical numbers. She's getting the ignore defense. He's getting the buffs from the previous turn. But her, no one can change that. Right, you can't take away the ignore 50% defense. You can decrease her attack, you do all the other stuff. Whereas without that buff, he's gonna hit significantly less, and that can be taken away. You can get out of turn order, so it doesn't happen that way. Those sort of things. So something definitely to think about is that they're hitting the same, but he's doing it in a much different turn order. But he is hitting harder than Phoenix. He is hitting harder than Magnar on that secondary ability with the buffs. Again, without the buffs, he's probably hitting the same as Phoenix and the same as Magnar, which were very close. So finally, we'll do the A1s here. Again, make sure we'll get debuffed, and then his A1 here is just gonna boom, 42,000. Her A1, 5360. So she has that 50% chance. So she's hitting a little bit harder than him as it is, and on top of it, she gets a 50% chance to do double damage. Magnar, 56, hitting harder. Also keep in mind that he can land a defense debuff. And then Phoenix, as long as someone has a debuff, he gets 2 turns. So 45, 61 Helm Smasher proc. And keep in mind he can also block revive with that ability, as compared to the lock cooldown skills. Block revive arguably better, but they're both pretty strong in and of themselves. His is 100% chance if he kills someone versus a only 30% chance. So there you go. There's the comparison. Let's now take it to final thoughts on this. I don't think there's any need to take them into the arena. I think you can probably guess what my thoughts are on Scion, but let's make it official in the final thoughts. Oh boy. My final thoughts on this champion. Wow. So let's just compound the issues with this champion. We'll talk about the good. He looks amazing. He has this kind of, if Locutus, those of you who are Star Trek Next Generation, if Locutus was taken over by demons rather than by cyborgs, I feel like that's what he would look like. It has, just for some reason, it gives him that vibe. He looks cool. He's a winged creature. He attacks like that. He's got little eyes on his sword, which match the multiple eyes on the one side. It looks cool. I like it. Looks ridiculous, right? In a good way. His kit reads okay. I think it reads okay. It in practice it's awful, but it had potential. If his multipliers were a lot harder, I think this would be a much different story. I think there'd be a different conversation happening among content creators and players alike. His starting stats are okay, right? I think these are very, very similar to Phoenix. He's fast, certainly faster than Phoenix. HP and attack are very similar. So, you know, his starting potential is very much the same. You get him for free over 2 months, so at least you have that free ability. You know, you've got this champion. There was talk that he was a learning champion, which after 15 months is an absolutely ridiculous statement to make. Not to mention the fact that you just did it 10 times on like champions. You did block champions. So what if I just pulled Phoenix last week and then this guy's irrelevant? You know, he's not very good. He's, you know, you're putting him in at 15 months of the game. It used to be a sacred and a chicken. We're already not happy with that. If this was a good champion, if this was a Stag Knight-esque champion, perhaps it would be too much for a login champion, but I think we'd be a lot more forgiving. I think if he was like Duck or any usable epic champion, an epic champion that you can insert into any squad and use as a reliable source of insert ability here. But he's not. His A3 is an AoE. It hits decidedly underwhelming, average at best. His A2 does hit hard, but it's under the caveat of having used that A3 prior and not having any sort of strip or any sort of changes to the fact that he has the ability. He's an attack-based champion, so all the normal problems of attack-based champions being fragile, glass cannons, the fact that a decreased attack can neuter them quite easily. Strengthen can neuter them. He does ignore shield, so that's one kind of neat thing. But, being a single target heal reduction block buffs is very situational. And then his A1, which looks cool. Over a sustained fight, this would be amazing. The problem is I can't think of any sustained fight where a block active skills would actually land, because sustained fights usually mean boss fights, and bosses are usually immune to block active skills. So everything about his kit is garbage. So you've already gotten people mad because the Sacred Shard and Chicken were taken away, but you gave us Cleopatrix and we kind of forgave you. So okay, I get it. 4 Sacred Shards and 4 5-star chickens versus a reasonably looking champion, a decent looking champion with a decent kit. But this isn't a decent kit. This isn't a decent looking champion. I mean, not in appearance, but looking in abilities. My only thought is that somehow he might be a usable champion. We'll find out soon for the Hydra boss. Everything else about this champion, I won't use. There's too many champions that can do what he does better. If you build him out for nukes, there's champions that are better. If you build him out for a block buffs, there's champions that are better. Lockout cooldowns, there's champions that are Countess Licks. I mean, she's a legendary, I get, but there's a whole lot of champions in this game that can do better what he does. And his passive is, you've got a dungeon here, but his passive really screams arena right now, but it could scream Hydra. So I think we will find out whether or not we can actually fit him into Hydra boss teams, and if he is a natural fit, and I'll give it a go. You know me. That's where this Saturday videos are going to be. Once the Hydra's out, is going to be all about the Hydra. So I think there's potential here for that. But overall, I think this was a real miss by Plarium. You didn't have to give us Duck or Stag Knight or Madame Saris, but you could have given us an A-tier champion. If those are S-tier epics, you could have given us an A-tier champion. You didn't. You gave us a C-tier champion, and that just reminds everyone that used to be 2 Sacreds and 2 Chickens, and now you've turned it into this. And it's unfortunate. It's a miss. I don't like him. I don't think he's worthwhile. People are going to tell me, well, you're not being fair. You've got too many champions. You have to realize not every champion can be number 1. True, but after 15 months, how many of you can honestly tell me that this guy is going to fit into a 15-month account lineup? Because that's when you get him, after 15 and a little bit months. So I suspect you won't. I suspect if you try to tell me that you can, you should have probably quit playing the game a lot earlier and restarted your account, because you had obviously really bad luck. I wouldn't use him on my free-to-play account, which is not even 271 yet. Other than maybe in a specific Doom Tower scenario or specific Hydra Boss coming up. Like, I just don't find him useful. So those are my thoughts on him. What are your thoughts? I'm sure most of you are in agreement. Those of you that aren't, that really like this champion, let me know in the comments down below where you see this kit fit. You know, it takes time. I've only had him for a day. I kind of played him out in the 4 dungeons. I tried to figure out where to use him. He's good for Spirit Affinity dungeon, but there's so many block heals out there that maybe not. But if for some stupid reason after 15 months you still can't do that, wow, I feel bad for you, but here's another opportunity for that. Or maybe the champion you're using, you don't have the gear you want on that champion because you have to use them for that dungeon, so this is a replacement. But overall, I think for the vast majority of people, you're going to agree that this is just not a good champion and an unfortunate opportunity missed by Plarium. Those are my thoughts. That's the video. I want to thank you for watching. I appreciate you, and we'll see you in the next video.